Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia. Welcome back to another Total War 3 Kingdom patch breakdown video, as patch 1.6.1 just entered beta earlier today. So this is a beta version of the upcoming patch, so you have to opt into this patch, and in case you're not familiar with how this works, you can go into your Steam library or where you have your game, click on properties, and under the beta tab, you can opt into certain versions of the game. In this case, you have to opt into 1.6.1. And this is an option that you always had, and currently you can even opt back to previous versions of patches in case you want to finish any old campaigns before the change to patch 1.6.0 when all the changes to the map happened. But for our case, we want to opt into this new patch as there are some very nice bug changes and patch changes to the game. So some of the headline changes here includes timeless character option no longer turns off if game settings such as difficulty level are changed mid-campaign, and it's also available in multiplayer co-op. So this is definitely one of the bug issues running into a change in difficulty level or game settings halfway through a campaign, and to have it available on multiplayer co-op is quite nice. Fixed issue where generic Nanman characters were not showing their weapons in battle. We have seen this a few times in our Menghua campaign where our generals are fighting bare-fisted, pretending they have weapons as they slash through air, and this has been modified. Nanman also now have extra bonus to satisfaction. So this is not a bug fix. This is actually one of the patch changes here in this upcoming patch. And this has a lot to do with the lack of methods for Nanman factions to balance satisfaction before they reach a very high rank. And this is because you don't have access to any of the title systems, and since you'll be doing a lot of confederation, it is likely that you will get some grudges between characters, and in that case you have to give up on the character, as in the case of Wutugu in our own Menghua campaign. Then the final headline change here is it fixed the issue where auto-resolve values were wildly off if continuing campaign from the launcher. Now this is a very unique bug and something that is quite new, as if you have continued a campaign or click the button that says continue a campaign from the game launcher, then apparently your auto-resolve values in game were just wildly off, and now that should be fixed. And we can jump into the details of some of this, and the game obviously states that the best way to enjoy all these changes is to start out a new save, as some old saves might still have compatibility issues with these patches. And of course, since this is a beta version, we can expect other bugs or perhaps even compatibility issues with the game, as there has been other patches in beta that were taken off the build because they caused game-ending crashes. Now that's not something you should be scared of to dissuade you from opting into this beta patch, because if that happens, you can simply rewind your version back to 1.6.0 and your game will be fine. Now, of course, you might be worried about your midway through campaigns, and perhaps the best way for those is just to stay on 1.6.0, finish them up, and if you want to start out a new campaign with some of these changes, like the changes to satisfaction of Nanman, and some of the other balance changes, then definitely consider opting into this beta and starting a new campaign. And jumping into the list of changes, it's pretty short, and most of these are bug fixes. We already talked about the auto-resolve value issue and the timeless character issue. And the next one is actually one that I put in a ticket for. Lu Zhi now has the correct bonuses from his career trait. The career trait is a terminology that CA uses for background titles, which is what I like to call them. And in this case, Lu Zhi is a faction leader in the 182 Mandate of Heaven, and with the recent changes to all the specializations on the background titles for all these faction leaders, Lu Zhi should have got a bonus that roughly equate to about 10% character experience gain, as well as another bonus, I believe, to administrators or assignments. I could be mistaken there, but there are two bonuses added to him, and he still had only 5% character experience gain that was on his character from before, and we noted this when we did the patch breakdown for 1.6.0, and now it has been fixed. And from the list of the fixes here, most of the fixes are tickets that were sent in before the launch of the game. So for us to see a complete fix of the game, we probably have to wait till 1.6.2, but this is a good start. And the very next bug fix is also a ticket I put in. This is also related to the armors on the new unique characters. I noted that during the battle showcase we did for Kui Pass, that Li Ru, Wei Yan, and Xun Yu all were missing armor stats on their new armor. So the game defaulted them all to 55 armor, which apparently is the default value for armor in the game, but that would not make sense, as Wei Yan should have a slightly heavier armor, and Li Ru and Xun You, being strategists, should have a lower armor, and that has been now fixed. Wei Yan also apparently had the problem of being able to unequip his armor, which is definitely not a great thing, and that has also been fixed for unique characters. Armors are bounded. And then we also have a fix to the 190 Yellow Turbans, as they can finally annex Yellow Turban rebel settlements once again. And this will only apply to new campaigns, so you definitely need to start a new one if you want to see this change. And speaking of a lot of things that were fixed and then broken again, we have the faction declaring war against vassals are now considered to be the aggressors towards the vassal lord when resolving treachery and generating subsequent deals. So this has to do with the fact that if you're coming in defense of your vassals, sometime you will lose diplomatic trustworthiness because you are breaking certain deals with the faction that were declaring war against your vassal. Because sometimes you might have a trade deal with them, you might have just made a peace deal with them, and you are deemed to be treacherous. But since you are coming in defense of your vassal, the game now correctly resolves that you're not the one breaking any of these deals, and you should not be gaining any treachery penalties when your vassals are being attacked and you coming in for defense. Now, other things could be still wrong with the game logic, so if you see any issues, definitely file a ticket in, and they'll try to get this fixed. Shixie apparently did not get access to spies at Duke level, so I guess unique units were not the only things missing, but the spy situation has been resolved, as he now will have correct access to spies once he reaches the rank of Duke. And there's also been some balance adjustment to gate passes. This has less to do with some of the other issues people have been noticing, as in you can siege a gate pass and then have a second army walk right through it, or the fact that gate passes don't block rivers, which I feel like is okay. It doesn't make logical sense for gate passes to actually block rivers. What they should do is do other things to rivers, which we'll see very soon. But regardless, there are also going to be more bugs with these new settlements in terms of gate passes, as we have experienced quite a few broken wall issues, and I don't know if this actually fixes everything. The first thing I noticed about Gate Pass is that you can change the tax rate. And the reason why I was messing with the tax rate and exempting the tax is because it was causing a lot of public order issues when I was raising taxes throughout the faction. So to fix this part of the issue, what the developers did is now each level up to Gate Passes will increase the public order and the reserve gain, as well as increasing the reserve capacity for each level. Now, the reserve portion has nothing to do with it, but the public order portion does have a lot to do with it. And this helps curb the dissatisfaction in gate passes, which was being used as these rebel farming counties, because they're kind of isolated, and when they reach -100, they will spawn a rebel faction, and they were very easy to destroy, and you could farm a lot of experience from them. So this has been fixed. And the cool thing here that's coming next is that sapping can no longer be used against gate passes. So perhaps the AI was doing some sort of invisible instant sapping on my gate passes in the Menghua campaign, resulting in holes in the wall. But now, since sapping has been taken away, perhaps the gate passes will always have indestructible walls before the battle. You can still destroy them with siege weapons, of course. And this will allow for more interesting fights, and hopefully that will fix some of the issues with these magical gaps that just appear in your gate pass on the very first battle, and somehow miraculously get fixed in the battle that follows it. But regardless, this should take care of it. You also will gain extra mounted artillery at a level earlier, and also gain a more powerful piece of mounted artillery once you reach the top level, which feels like a pretty good bonus, especially since they are also going to fix the multi-crossbow bug later on in this patch note, where they were only firing 1 bolt instead of the typical 5. And then the next change is the Yellow Turban and Bandit factions will now have the correct garrison that does not include a cavalry unit, which neither factions really specializes in. And then the next change is what I think the direction of the river change should really head towards, but the change is probably not enough of a nerf. So supply cost per turn on rivers and seas are being increased from -5 per turn to -30. For certain army compositions, if your army does not have enough cunning on the 3 generals or however many generals you have in the army, then this will hurt. Because if you don't have cunning to counterbalance the military supply loss, and you will lose more beyond this amount, depending on season, depending on if you're on friendly territory or enemy territory. So those will still apply on top of the fact that you're in river or sea. But if you have a lot of cunning and a lot of faction-wide bonuses on military supplies, then this technically would not hurt you enough to alter your strategy. But for some early game composition, let's say you're playing as Liu Bei in 190, then your army has really bad cunning. Liu Bei, Guan Yu, Zhang Fei all have very low cunning. Therefore, if you jump into a river, you're very likely to start losing all your supplies very rapidly. And once you do that, you will suffer attrition. And that will actually punish you quite a bit. My only concern with this is that human players can play around this quite well by setting up the army in a composition where you have decent amount of cunning, because most armies typically will have one strategist, but AI will suffer from this much more than human players. Would AI behavior change so they no longer want to sell down these rivers for a long time? Because the end result might be an AI faction from the north ends up tunnel visioning on you. They try to reach you by land, and usually they come and they're already halfway attrition to death. Now, if they're going to come by sea, they're going to be attrition even more. So that by the time they reach you, the army's pretty much useless. And perhaps it's going to hurt the AI much more than it will hurt the player. But this is definitely a step in the right direction, because you don't want to see AI armies just flooding down rivers trying to reach your location. Although I have found gates to be very attractive targets for the AI, so it doesn't block their access in river, but they will often embark and try to take your gate pass, assuming you don't have a full stack there. So it still kind of does what it's intending to do, and I would probably want to see additional changes to how rivers work in the game, of course. But this is a nice move in the right direction. Then we can cover how exactly Nanman factions will get these extra bonuses to satisfaction. So each major fealty will now give +5 satisfaction to all characters. So what are major fealties? Well, if you remember the tribal fealty page, there are 7 factions in the middle with bigger icons out of the 19 tribes. And these 7 are the 4 playable factions in Meng Huo, Lady Zhurong, Mu Lu, and Sha Mo Ke. Then there are 3 factions that are deemed major tribes, and they are Duo Si, Wu Tu Gu, and Yang Feng. And these 7 are the major factions in the Nanman factions or southern tribes, and they will each give you major fealty. Now, of course, you can only get 6 of these because you always play as one of them. And that amounts to 30 points of satisfaction to all characters if you get all their fealties. Then there are 2 reforms that are given +5 satisfaction to all characters, and 1 reform given +10 to all characters. So if we do the math here, that is +50 satisfaction that's added into the game with this new patch. And that's exactly enough to get rid of any grudges, because a faction-wide grudge is 50 points against satisfaction. So I feel like they balanced it quite well, because it's very hard to control whether or not the enemy character will develop grudges. And this way, at least you have a method to get rid of that. And that will help you as you confederate all the tribes and unite them. Now, satisfaction is only an issue really in the early game. Once you reach high enough rank, the final 2 faction rank of the Nanman faction will increase your satisfaction by about 15. And there are very good characters like Meng Ya Chang who can boost your satisfaction by 10 faction wide, and your leader can obviously build a lot of authority to also fix that. So these are all things to consider, and perhaps now with this extra 50, you don't need to waste that many points on authority on your leader and go for more useful stats such as resolve, instinct, or expertise. but these are pretty nice changes in the right direction for non-mind character management, especially if you're hoarding characters like I was in my campaign. This definitely would have helped. Aside from this, many of you have also noted that melee evasion magically decreased by 15% on all non-mind characters, and this was because there was apparently a hidden handicap given to all non-mind armies because of the fact that once you get extra fealty, you'll gain these stats back. And this was a very unclear way of doing things, as many players found it impossible to explain why their melee evasions were dropping, and apparently this also applied to melee damage and range block chance. Well, now the game has got rid of these hidden handicap, so all non-mind characters will technically become stronger now because these debuffs are taken off the game. So that's a nice change. If you're looking to get started with a new non-mind campaign, perhaps now is a great time to do so. Or maybe wait till patch 1.6.2. And then you also have some issues with the new flag changes from patch 1.6.0, where you had the wrong Emperor flags for some of the key factions that have flag changes once you become an Emperor, and they were being used incorrectly in battle. And there were also issues with a few unique cases, as in Lu Bu's flag was displaying incorrectly in the 194 start date, which is the only start date he has. And also Sun Jian was not using his new flags in the custom battles, and all these has been resolved. And then we also have an issue where some siege map apparently had caltrops all over the ground, and that would be insane. I didn't see any of these, but I also experienced some siege map pulling up the wrong map asset because it was the updated terrains, I believe, and the revamp of the map is causing some of these issues, but those are not fixed in this patch. And then there were also some localization fixes for simplified Chinese, and also UI scaling was locked to a minimum value of, I think, 1.5 times before the patch change here, and now you can scale it up as much as you want in case you're using a 4K monitor or something like that, and you want to scale the UI to match your monitor size. Swap retinue button finally works again, as you can now swap out your general. This was something that was broken for every single faction after 1.6, so that should work now. And then comes the item disappearing, or item stealing as the developer are calling it. And this has to do with apparently some sort of event trigger that would spawn some character, and then these characters would not spawn at all, but then they were taking your items such as your mounts and weapons when they were spawned, and then they would not show up, and then you end up losing those items, which happened to us at least twice in our campaign. We lost a heavenly sword, a silver weapon, and Utugu's axe. So those were all very sad things, but hopefully this will officially fix that. And then you also had some other map issues with Pengcheng, which got a big fix because it got revamped into 2 separate commanderies with Pengcheng and Xiapi. And now there was this weird, vertical cliff that you had to climb sieging that siege battle. And then there's also some feedback on the particular colors of Liu Bei's flag being too white, perhaps. And now it's very different with a gold background, a darker green edge, and still some elements of that white symbol and pattern around the edges. And then the gamma slider for the game has been back. I guess it was disappeared in the last patch. And we talked about the multi-bolt crossbow not finding the right amount of bolts. That's been fixed. And we also have a performance issue. This was definitely a frame rate issue. I think we noticed it quite a bit, particularly in the non-mon jungles. Perhaps that was using up too much asset, but this has been fixed, so that should be good. If you notice any lags, particularly around settlement labels on the campaign map, this will explain it. And of course, that's all the patch changes on patch 1.6.1. And I know for many of you, that's clearly not enough, as there's definitely other bugs in the game still. But these things take time. I think from what I noticed, most of these are bug tickets that were put in pre-launch by content creators like myself who had the chance to test the game. And after it was released to the public, to the wider player base, we obviously have many more bug discoveries, and they will take time to get fixed. But I'm pretty sure they will eventually get fixed before they get broken again, but it's a matter of progress. Eventually we'll get there with a pristine copy of the game that has very limited bugs, and at this point, at least the game doesn't have any game-crushing bugs, and it shouldn't affect your campaign that much. Now, of course, it was painful to lose a few items, or perhaps a satisfaction issue with Utugu leaving us. Those are all things that could have been better, but it didn't break the game. We still had a fun campaign all the way till the end, until we killed off Cao Cao in our Menhuo campaign. So these are the new patch changes, trying to keep this short, and hopefully you guys will enjoy this, and see you guys next time. Bye!